Okay, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us for this event. We at Left Bank Books are very honored and excited to present food-loving dietitian and culinary expert Serena Ball, who will discuss her new cookbook, the Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook. More than 100 easy, healthy recipes to reduce food waste, eat in season, and help the earth. So some notes before we dive in. For all of you who are here in person, thank you for being here and for wearing your mask for the duration of the event, except when you're enjoying your food later on. We're also continuing to provide hybrid events to allow this programming to be reachable to a wider audience. So those of you joining us from your home, we welcome and appreciate your support as well. So tonight's event is only possible because of all of you. When you support Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into your local economy. So it helps keep our bookstore open, and it also helps keep your streets paved, your libraries funded, parks free, and so many other things that make St. Louis an amazing place. So thank you all so much for shopping local and supporting us tonight. We at Left Bank are working every day to bring fun, educational, and revolutionary events both in person and virtually. So of note, January 25th, we'll be hosting Linda Maurice and her new book, Nuked: Echoes of the Hiroshima Bomb in St. Louis, for those of you interested in local history. And on February 1st, we'll have Goldie Taylor joining us for the launch event of her new memoir, Love You Save. We encourage you to check out our event calendar on our website, left-bank.com, for more information and a full list of programming for readers of all ages. So for tonight's event, following their best-selling 30-minute Mediterranean Diet Cookbook and easy everyday Mediterranean Diet Cookbook, food-loving dietitians and instructors Serena Ball and co-author Deanna Segrave-Daly are back, serving up delicious climate cuisine with a Mediterranean spin. The science is clear. A Mediterranean-style diet is one of the healthiest and most sustainable in the world. The Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook is a comprehensive guide to getting the most from this incredible regimen, with 10 steps to a more eco-friendly kitchen, including helpful guidance on a more sustainable ingredient choice, energy-saving cooking methods, smarter storage, and food waste reduction. With beautiful, inspiring, full-color photographs throughout, this cookbook is an indispensable resource for a climate-friendly kitchen. These mouth-watering, budget-friendly recipes are so good for you and good for the earth. So please join me in welcoming Serena Ball.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you to everyone who turned out today and who is online. Hi, everybody online. Thank you for joining today. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so honored to be in this beautiful bookstore. And also, I'm super excited to talk about this cookbook because it really was so much fun to do this Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook. This is the third one of our we've written 3 Mediterranean Diet Cookbooks with, here's a little inside scoop that a 4th cookbook will be coming out actually in 2024, so about this time in 2024. And it's just been so fun to hear from so many of you who have already purchased the book and who have cooked from it for years and have come back to us and said, thanks so much for writing it. It's easy to follow. My health has improved. I've lost weight. My heart disease risk seems to have gone down. And it's just really great to be able to write this one, because this one, Deanna and I had so much fun just trying out all the tips and tricks to help reduce food waste and to save money. This is all about budget-friendly cooking, which is perfect timing right now with eggs that I don't even know what they were the last time I was in. They were literally like $6 the last time I was in. So this is great cooking to be able to reduce food waste and healthy cooking for yourself, your family, and for the planet. So I'm going to get started by making a few of the recipes, but also just give those of you who may not be super familiar with the Mediterranean diet kind of an overview, because it's kind of really interesting how this whole concept of the Mediterranean diet just evolved. And what happened was, back in the 1960s, a couple of researchers visited Greece and Italy, and followed a couple populations that were working class folks and found that those folks had less incidence of heart disease compared to people back in America and other populations around the world. And they thought, why just, this grouping of people, why do they have less heart disease? And so followed them for many, many years, and the amount of research around the Mediterranean diet is kind of astounding when you dig into it, and that's what I love to do. So it's been really fun to look at what happens when, for example, you take a Mediterranean style diet and teach it to folks in Australia and use those particular foods that you find in a Mediterranean style diet, and they eat that way for a couple years, and then you follow them and you find that those folks who followed that diet have less risk of dementia and less incident of dementia, do better in cognitive tests. And so we assume that then following the Mediterranean diet has lower risk of cognitive decline with age and less Alzheimer's disease. That stuff is so interesting. What is it about the Mediterranean diet? Well, when we look at the Mediterranean Sea, we see that it is surrounded by 21 countries. So it's not just Greece and Italy, it's all of those countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. It's 21 countries. And what we found is that most of those countries have similar foods in their diet, but it's the spices and the way that they prepare it that makes it unique to those cultures and to those places around and countries around the Mediterranean. So what is it? It is lots of fruits and vegetables, of course, but in the Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook, we focus a lot on frozen and canned foods, which I know you're like, what? Frozen and canned? Well, they're a lot more budget friendly sometimes, and especially in St. Louis in the middle of the winter time, they're especially more budget friendly, but they're also contain less food waste, because if you're buying frozen vegetables, you're not watching them go moldy in the bottom of the refrigerator, and you're not having to cut off the stuff that you're not going to eat. The whole thing you can eat, and then you can, yes, reuse that bag when you are done. I brought a couple, let's see, most of the things that I brought today, I brought in little containers that I had used before. So for example, this is my peas plastic bag. As you can see, I cut off the top, and yes, I make my children bring their sandwiches in their lunchbox in this sort of bag like this. You can ask my daughter this in the back, and she will agree with me. So that is a way to reuse and reuse just things that are already coming into your home that you're, trying to be healthy and trying to eat eat healthy foods, but they do come with some packaging, however minimal it may be. So lots of fruits and vegetables in the Mediterranean diet, lots of beans and lentils. Those are eaten almost every day. Of course, it's on the Mediterranean Sea, so it's seafood, usually at least twice a week. Again, we live in St. Louis, totally landlocked. How do we eat seafood? Canned and frozen fish is a great source of seafood. We have some of the most beautiful pictures of canned fish you've probably ever seen in your life in this cookbook. We have a lovely photographer, her name is Elise, and she cooked all of these recipes, and here's a little inside scoop on how she did it. So, of course, she lives, now look at how beautiful this is. Isn't this a beautiful picture of some canned sardines? Now, we don't use all canned sardines in the book. I mean, canned tuna is just fine. There's plenty of canned tuna recipes in here too. But the way Elise would cook all of these recipes is we would send her the recipes, and she lives in Philadelphia. And so she took the photographs over several weeks I think it was about 8 weeks, it was about 2 months. And we sent her the recipes, and then she would make them on a particular day. And she would say, Serena, I'm making your scalliot cacio pepe today, or in a couple of days. And so I would have to be around that day so that when she took if she had any questions about the preparation of the recipe or how I wanted it photographed, she could just use the Voxer app for me, and I would just have to listen to the message and respond. It's like a walkie-talkie. So we would just Vox back and forth the whole day until she got the recipe photographed right. But it was also really good because she's not a super fabulous cook. She can cook, but her specialty is more the photography. So anytime Elise had a question about a recipe or it wasn't clear, we made sure that we adapted the recipe and then made it super simple. So I like to say that most of these recipes are very simple for a very early or novice cook, I guess you would say. We also had several testers test the recipe. So for example, Rachel from St. Paul, Minnesota said that this particular zucchini, this is such a great way to use up zucchini to incorporate more veggies. I never thought to use zucchini on pasta sauce, and I would never have known there were anchovies in this sauce. So again, kind of slipping in some seafood here and there, and you would be amazed by what happens when you add just 2 anchovies to a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of garlic and saute it until the anchovies just melt into the sauce and provide sort of this umami flavor and a richness to it, but also some of the omega-3 fatty acids that come in anchovies. Now, if you're not a huge fish fan, we have a couple other recipes in here that you may want to try as well. But the Mediterranean diet does include so we talked about lots of fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils, seafood, whole grains. All of the recipes in here include whole grains. You'd be surprised that you can bake with whole wheat flour, and it provides a beautiful baked goods. The one recipe that we have is the spiced Turkish coffee cake, and that is because it is not a typo. Coffee cake actually includes some coffee in the coffee cake, and then because we use a whole fat yogurt and some olive oil and honey in a lot of the recipes, those whole grain flours, which can make baked goods somewhat dense and dry, because you use honey, which is a natural humectant, they call it. Basically, it just means it keeps baked goods moist. Then they stay moist and yummy. So we talked about whole grains and different. Let's see. I'll just name the list again. So fruits and vegetables, lentils, and seafood, whole grains, and then dairy foods. So fermented dairy foods, fermented cheese, and yogurt, a big part of the Mediterranean diet, especially yogurt. And here's kind of something interesting that we have researched and from talking to people and visiting over around the Mediterranean, most of the yogurt, while we use Greek yogurt in our recipes, that's what's available mostly in the US, most people in Mediterranean countries use what we call regular yogurt, not Greek yogurt. So they use something that's not quite as high in protein, it's more watery, but it's still that plain yogurt. And so they add a lot of like a drizzle of olive oil, or they would add spices or fruits or nuts, which I just kind of think is interesting. But it definitely is part of the Mediterranean diet. And then, of course, there is some meat, and it's used especially, we use it in the Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook as a flavoring agent, but also because Americans eat meat, and because it is absolutely part of the sustainable picture, that it's important to eat meat because you can't raise crops everywhere. I mean, if you go to the Western United States and watch where sheep or goats or cattle are grazed, it's not cropland. It is rugged and it is rocky and it is scrubland, and you cannot raise crops there. And so animal protein is an important way of converting that land and using it more sustainably and converting it into high quality protein. So we do have a chapter, we say that we will even help convert your favorite husband or grandfather or partner to a sustainable Mediterranean diet, because we are for the meat and potato person. And we are somebody who will absolutely enjoy the recipes in this book. All right. So any questions from anyone about the Mediterranean diet? Because otherwise I'm just gonna start making some food and we'll talk more about it and some of the different tips that we have in the book. Now, the first recipe that I'm gonna make is actually the creamy cantaloupe smoothie. And I had it marked here and the marking fell off. But in the Midwest, here we go. So creamy cantaloupe orange smoothie. In the Midwest, in the wintertime, we don't get a lot of cantaloupe. It is not very seasonal. And so we use, did you find a knife, Evan?
Oh, so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. When you get a chance. So instead of using cantaloupe in this smoothie, we are going to use frozen fruit. Now, I talked a lot about frozen vegetables, but just like frozen vegetables, frozen fruit and frozen vegetables are sometimes even more nutritious than their fresh counterpart. And that, of course, is because they are picked at the peak of ripeness, and they are flash frozen. And so while the cherries that you might buy in the grocery store in the summertime maybe came from Michigan or maybe came from Washington and they had to travel all the way here, these guys were picked in Washington and flash frozen. I've actually been to some of the raspberry farms up in Washington, in the northwest corner of Washington, and it is amazing how, thank you so much, I appreciate that. It is amazing to see how they literally are on the bush at 10 o'clock well, actually they usually pick them in the morning really early because they want them to kind of cool down during the night, overnight. Because if they pick them at the end of the day, they're really hot and it takes even longer for them to cool down, which then, because they want to get them frozen as soon as possible. So they pick them really early in the morning and that's usually they're done by 10 o'clock in the morning. And they have these really cool tractors that drive through the raspberry farms and they just kind of shake the bushes and they fall off really gently into these conveyor belt tractors, and then they take them back and they put them in sort of a cold warehouse overnight. And then the next day, so within 24 hours, they're flash frozen. And so those nutrients are locked in, and that's very typical for pretty much any frozen fruit. And so the nutrients, again, are locked in, and you probably get more nutrition in a bag of frozen cherries than you would in fresh cherries, which is sort of counterintuitive, but because they have to travel so far, and of course, anytime that oxygen is around fruit, some of those nutrients and antioxidants oxidize, and so they lose it. I mean, not all of it, but some of it. So what we're going to do is make this smoothie out of just get the other ingredients up here so I don't forget something. So it is called a creamy cantaloupe orange smoothie because we use the whole orange. And that's kind of a fun thing for a couple of reasons, because number one, of course, you don't have to find something to do with the peels. You don't have to compost them. You don't have to, what we do in the wintertime is a lot of times we'll take the orange peels or lemon or grapefruit peels and put them in a pot of water on the stove and just kind of simmer them because it smells really good and it adds moisture to the air. But you don't have to do that with this orange. in particular, I like to use the cuties, but you can use or a mandarin, but you can use a full navel orange, but you would just use about half of it. And if you've ever made if you've ever used a whole orange in cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving time or Christmas time, it's kind of the same idea. So you put the whole orange in, including the peel, and then you add a half a cup of milk and about 2/3 cup of yogurt, which our next book actually has a recipe for using, for making your own yogurt, which is really not that hard. And then you don't have to keep buying the containers of Greek yogurt, although you can probably find a lot of uses for all those containers. But if you make your own, you just buy one container, and then it's a really fun process of just, you cook the milk and then you add like a tablespoon of the store-bought yogurt, and then it just kind of sets overnight in the refrigerator after you bring it to a certain temperature. And then if you make it in large mason jars like this, then you have those in the refrigerator basically whenever you need it. So stay tuned for the next book, but in the meantime, there is lots of recipes for making your own yogurt online, and that's my favorite kind, is to just kind of make it in mason jars. All right, so let me just make sure this is on right and that we are covered up, because that's all we need is to put stuff all over all these books. All right. It doesn't take too long. All right, that's good. Now, like I said, this is frozen cherries, but I think it's 2.5 cups, yes. But you could use frozen blueberries. You could absolutely use frozen pineapple. You could use like a berry mix. And we tasted them last night. They were so good with the cherries. We tested it. When we tested the recipes, we mostly used the cantaloupe just to get tested a couple times to get the proportions right. But like I said, one of our testers used the blueberries. So I never tried it with the cherries before. Oh my goodness, it was so good. A little bit of vanilla, I don't want to forget that, so I'm gonna put that in right now too. And then we're gonna let you guys taste it. We have a couple of sample cups over there. So maybe my daughter can help scoop this out. Oh, we lost one down there. Now, this is gonna seem like a really long time, at least for me, it's gonna seem, because it's gonna taste like almost a minute, but we'll get I did a TV spot last week, and we know that we never ever, I did one time, because I do TV every once in a while, and the one time that I brought a blender to the TV spot, it killed like all my time on TV, so I never ever ever bring any sort of smoothie thing for TV, but thank you for being patient, because you're all like just staring at me as I'm staring at the blender just saying, hurry up here. Okay, it's just gonna be really thick. It's gonna be more like a smoothie bowl, but it's close enough. All right. So this is the creamy cantaloupe orange smoothie with cherries. And then you wanna just scoop away. Actually, do you wanna just do it like over here? Right there. Just scoop them, put them on the tray here, and then you can just scoop a little bit out. I've got a little scooper here. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna take this one down. And then, now, the second recipe that I'm gonna talk through while she's scooping that out is, let's bring lots of towels to tidy up here. The second one is we have some yummy food here for sampling after the event is over while we're signing books, is the pumpkin hummus. So that is the picture. There's no picture for this one, but it is on the toasted squash and cheese board. So this is basically what we do for dinner a lot at my house. We just throw a whole bunch of stuff on a sheet tray. It's not even in a pretty round bowl like this. It's just basically on the sheet tray, and it's little bits of, it's a great way to clean out the refrigerator at the end of the week. Usually we do it Sunday night, and we pop a great bowl of popcorn, and then we put out whatever's left in the fridge. So maybe some lunch meat that's left, or some bits of cheese. There's always random crackers left, couple, like a bag of that, and then olives or whatever, pickles, maybe a few carrots that we chop up and put on there, or some celery, and then some fruit and cheese, or hummus. And we make the homemade hummus with, yeah, there you go. And we've got this here right here. That's for any problem. You missed the sign. Good job. Just barely, but you did. Good job, girl. It's okay. Don't worry about this. So our particular hummus recipe is very much like that from the Vine Catering, I'm sure, but it has no garlic in it, because then it's a little bit more adaptable to maybe a sweet hummus, and you can serve it with a little bit of cinnamon. And then if you add the pumpkin, like for example, if you ever make pumpkin bread or pumpkin muffins, you always use just a half can of pumpkin. So this is a great way to use up, and that's kind of how it started, is to use up a half can of pumpkin in hummus, and it gives it a really kind of sweeter flavor and a really nice texture. Good?
That's awesome.
Yeah, just go around and everybody can grab one. And we also, a trick is, hummus has only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 ingredients. So it's basically a can of chickpeas, and then don't toss that that liquid that the hummus or that the chickpeas come in, because if you use that liquid, it's also called aquafaba, which is a very starchy and B vitamin rich liquid that it's canned in, and it also has a little bit of salt in there, but it makes the hummus really light and kind of fluffy, because it's really, it just like whizzes up. It actually can be used also as an egg substitute, and you can make a type of meringue out of it. It becomes that light and fluffy. I've tried it before in the mixer. You just put a bunch of the bean juice basically in the mixer, and then whip it up with the whisk attachment, and it becomes exactly like egg yolks, egg white. It's amazing. So anyway, you take that aquafaba with a can of chickpeas, and then add some salt and some olive oil, and then basically the hummus is and then normally you would add tahini, which is sesame seed paste. But we always say we want to make sure it's something that you have in your pantry and that you don't have to go to the store for, and that is budget friendly, and that would be peanut butter. So we almost always use peanut butter in our hummus, and you can't taste too much of a difference. If you're really a hummus connoisseur, you probably could, but it still has that nuttiness in it, and so it's yummy in it. And then your hummus is your canvas, so you can add garlic in it if you want to make it into a sandwich bread, or if you want to make it sort of a sweet hummus and add the pumpkin and the cinnamon, then you could swirl it into oatmeal. It's not super sweet, so just swirling it into oatmeal or into yogurt. And again, thinking about different ways to just use up stuff in your refrigerator. So you'll get to taste the Vines hummus after that. But this one, I love to talk through it because it's something like, it's literally like 4 ingredients and then you add the hummus or the pumpkin and that's fine. So it's a fun one. And then you can put it on a fabulous board like this, or you can just scoop it up and use it how you would normally, or putting it on oatmeal. In fact, we've even made oatmeal for dinner at night, and that's one of the toppers that we'll add to it because then it can be either sweet or savory. All right, and then the second one is like this tabbouleh. So this is really pretty tabbouleh from the Vine. This is our toasted cauliflower tabbouleh. Now, what we do is we don't like to say that we sneak vegetables in, but we like to use them in unusual ways. Like you probably haven't made cauliflower out of your, or you made tabbouleh out of your cauliflower, but you probably would serve cauliflower as a side. And so we say we'll make it into tabbouleh because then that's kind of a new and interesting way to make cauliflower a little bit more exciting. I did a TV spot last week that this is always the thing that you hate, or that you have nightmares about before your TV spot. That the host, you get on there because you can't really interview the host before you go on there, and I get on there, and of course I'm making the toasted cauliflower tabbouleh on this TV spot, and she says, "And what do you do if you don't like cauliflower?" So she said, but she was really nice. She said, "But it looks like there's not a lot of cauliflower in there." And I said, "No, and I promise it's not like any cauliflower you've ever tasted before. Because what you do is you take a bag of frozen riced cauliflower." So you probably know the trend of taking cauliflower and making it low carb, or rice and making it low carb by making it out of cauliflower. Personally, I'd rather just have the rice and use brown rice, but it is very helpful to have this riced cauliflower. You can make your own riced cauliflower too by just whizzing up a head of cauliflower. But you just put it on, take the frozen cauliflower, and we have, actually I didn't talk about this too much, but in all of our recipes, we have healthy kitchen hacks. So not only do you have 100+ recipes in here, you also have 100+ healthy kitchen hacks in here. And so with every single recipe, we give you either a substitution in case you don't have whatever's in the recipe, you can still make it, or if you don't like it, or just a kitchen tip that makes things easier and quicker in the kitchen. So with any frozen vegetable, so frozen broccoli florets, frozen cauliflower florets, frozen carrots, or even the fabulous mixed vegetables, which are the little squares of carrots and lima beans and whatever corn that's in there. What else is in there? I think it's orange, yellow, green. You can take that straight from frozen and go directly into the oven, just coat it in a little bit of olive oil and roast it straight from frozen. You don't have to thaw it first. And so that's what we sort of try to explain in this toasted cauliflower tabbouleh. But the trick for going straight from freezer to oven without thawing it first is to preheat your oven tray. So you put some olive oil on the oven tray, and then you put it in the oven as the oven is preheating. And not only is that a trick for making better roasted from frozen vegetables, but you're taking advantage of that preheat in the oven. So it saves a little bit of energy in terms of cutting the cooking time in there, because your tray doesn't have to heat up once you put it in there. So you take the olive oil, you add the frozen cauliflower straight to the tray, put it in there for a couple minutes, and then you do have to stir it once just so that it gets evenly toasted. And it comes out all toasty and roasty and nutty, and it looks kind of a dark brown like your bulgur, which is what you usually make hummus out, or that you make tabbouleh out of, which is a whole grain wheat that has just been kind of pulverized, kind of cut up a lot. And then, did you say pulverized?
I did.
That came from somewhere. It was in the room. That's right. So it comes from this whole grain, which is great that it's already chopped up, because whole grain pieces of wheat are yummy, but they take a long time to chew and they're very chewy. So you take that and then you add a whole bunch of herbs. So we almost always in our recipes call for cups full of herbs instead of tablespoons of herbs. And that is because, number one reason, they're super healthy and they're super inexpensive. So usually you can buy a bunch of herbs for under $2, usually around $1. And if you use cupfuls of herbs instead of tablespoons of herbs, you're using up your herbs quicker and they don't turn into moldy mush in the bottom of your refrigerator. So almost always you can, if a recipe calls for a tablespoon or a teaspoon of an herb, you can almost always substitute a cupful at least. And chopping up the entire herb, don't just chop to like the stalk, chop all the way to the end, because, for example, cilantro stems are sweeter than the leaves themselves. And they're so yummy. If you're a cilantro lover, I do realize that some people don't love cilantro, but if you do, the stem itself, and then with parsley, which is what we use in our tabbouleh, is if you chop it really finely, it's just like any other crunchy vegetable that might be in there. But toss herbs into salads, soups, stews, sandwiches. Use it just like you would on lettuce on your sandwich. And especially if it's chopped up, you will get a few people that say, are these parsley stems in my sandwich? But, you just say yes and move on, and then somebody's happy that you made a sandwich for them. So. Then you use, for this particular tabbouleh, we call for fresh tomatoes if it's summertime, or canned tomatoes if it's wintertime. Because again, you can just take those canned tomatoes, drain them, save the juice for soups or stews again, and then when you mix it in with that fresh parsley, so you've got the cauliflower, the fresh parsley, the canned tomatoes, and then a really nice oil and lemon juice and garlic vinaigrette, it's so fresh and so tasty, and a perfect winter salad because it's just more hearty and yet still fresh tasting. So that's one of my favorite recipes in the whole book. And the lady on the TV said, well, that looks good, but it was a virtual TV spot, so she couldn't taste it. But I hope she came home and made it. So that is our tabbouleh. And then I have one more that I'm going to make for you guys really quick. And then, unless you have any questions, we'll be signing books and eating some of this yummy stuff. All right. So the last one is our lemon pepper walnut. This is a very long title. Some of the titles in here, we're like, well, you have to include this word because it just makes it sound more yummy. So this is a long title. Lemon, black pepper, and honey toasted walnuts. Another simple recipe, which is also very adaptable to what you might have on hand. So you could use peanuts. We've used peanuts. I've done it with peanuts many times in this when I've adapted this recipe. You could use almonds, but today we are actually using walnuts. And what you do is, this is all turned on, okay. Before the pan is even turned on, you just add about 1.5 cups of walnuts. And I use this all the time for teacher gifts at the end of the year or at Christmas time. And now you notice that my lemon doesn't look, like the most beautiful lemon, because I could have gone to the store and said, oh, I'm going to get a beautiful lemon for this cooking demo. But I wanted to show you guys that it's okay if they get kind of wrinkly. They still taste fine, and they still have plenty of juice in there. In fact, in some ways, they're even better because they're easier to microplane them when they're a little bit more wrinkly like this than when they're super smooth and flesh with oils and juice. And I also wanted to say that sometimes they juice a little bit easier. So anytime you have a lemon, you want roll it a little bit just to release some of the juices in the sack. We're actually not going to use the lemon, but we always, with almost all of our recipes, you could almost always use the juice and the zest. So anytime you use the juice of a lemon or any citrus, you could always zest the peel. And that just makes it so that you're using up a little bit more of it before you toss it. And it just adds so much extra flavor. The zest of any sort of citrus is so much more flavorful. And if you have a good zester like this, you won't get any of the white stuff, which is the bitter stuff. It will just add more of the oils and the essence of the lemon. And if you do happen to have a recipe that uses just the juice of a lemon or a grapefruit or a orange, you can just zest it first and just put it onto a plate, and then either just dump the zest into a plastic like a yogurt container or something that you're going to then put in the freezer, or use one of these glass containers that you can get the really small ones, and you can just zest it really quick and then throw it into the freezer, and then just pull out a little pinch when you're wanting to make your soup or your stew a little bit more flavorful, or your any sort of smoothie. It just adds so much extra flavor. All right, so just a little bit of the zest, and then I have here just 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And this is not my trick, but it is one of my favorite ones that made it into the book. I think it's with the cacio e pepe. Probably most of you have a pepper grinder. This is genius. If you always have, the recipe always calls like for 1/4 teaspoon of pepper or 1/2 teaspoon, and so you just eyeball it in there. One time, take a piece of paper. It can be parchment paper or whatever. It could just be a piece of paper that your kids bring home from school, and you take your pepper and you go like 15 or 20 turns of the pepper, and then you scoop it up, and then you like very carefully get it into that teaspoon or that table or that 1/2 teaspoon, and you see how many grinds it takes to make 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon, and then you always know, and you don't have to try to figure it out every time or like put it into your little teeny tiny 1/4 teaspoon. My favorite tip. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? But of course I haven't, and lots of us don't. So that's what I've done, but I actually did measure it out for us today because it made it a little bit easier. So it's just 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then you just let these guys warm up a little bit, and you guys will start to smell them. One tip that I forgot to say with the orange is another reason why we do use the peels of the orange, and why in most of our recipes we do use the peels. You smell the food, don't you? I heard that you like to smell things. There's a cat down here. I'm not talking to the floor, just for you online who are wondering who I'm talking to. But the reason why we do use the peels of the orange and the peels of the potatoes in most of our recipes, and sometimes even beets, is and carrots, always keeping the peels on the carrots. And that was something that Deanna sort of had to learn. She said, peels on carrots are just something I've never used. I just always peel carrots. I don't know why, I just do. My mom always did, I do. And we can already smell this. But not all, but a lot of the antioxidants are located right below the peel of any fruit or vegetable. And that is because, of course, how are the fruit or vegetable, any sort of disease or insect that's going to attack them, it's going to be on the outside peel, obviously. So most of those antioxidants and polyphenols and all of the components that help prevent, attack, or heal the plant or the vegetable are located right underneath the skin. So if you're peeling off all that off, then you're just peeling that down the drain. So it's with the this was fun research too. With the mandarin, it actually increases the amount of vitamin C in the mandarin by 3 times if you use the outside peel. So you're getting bonus extra nutrients just by using the outside peel. So that was kind of it was hard research to find. Yes.
Does it add any fiber to
It does. I think there's 6 grams of fiber in that smoothie and there's 2 servings in there. So, and then with the cherries, it probably has even more because you got the cherry skin on there. So that's a lot of fiber. Yeah. Very good question. Okay. The only thing you have to be careful of is not to burn these guys. And this burner works really, really quickly. So I'm just going to make sure that I think that's good enough there. Well, it's still a little not hot. Okay. So there, I thought of one. Can you guys smell it?
I can.
No? Okay. Well, you have this on here. But one more thing I was going to say about that smoothie. I can't remember. Anyway, but we have a variation of this recipe actually in all of our books. I think this one it's peanuts, this one is almonds, and then with the different spices. So there are literally probably hundreds of combinations. We have a rosemary. I think this one's let's see if I can remember. I think this one's rosemary almonds, rosemary something almonds. And then that one, it's sweet and spicy peanuts, I think. Let's see, where are honey rosemary almonds. Okay, honey rosemary almonds, but you make them the same way every single time. You just kind of warm up the nuts so that they get a little bit, so you can start to smell it. Okay, now I can start to smell them. And then you add the salt in there while it's warming up. And then you just add a honey roasted pecans with thyme. And that's the picture in this one. So, and then you really quickly, which I should have done ahead of time, but I'm going to just kind of eyeball it now, is you add a tablespoon of honey. And this one's coming out quite slow. And then it just kind of coats the nuts and really, you'll be amazed. You don't have to do all those steps. For those of you who have ever made roasted nuts in the oven where you have to, or even the ones that have egg whites on them, oh my goodness, those are a pain in the neck. These are so easy. You can just do them in the skillet and then just they coat really, really well. I don't toss them out of here. And they're so yummy, and they don't last very long because people always eat them, but they will last if you eat them too. If you need to give them for gifts and you tell people not to eat them or you hide them, they will last. So, all right. Now can you smell them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you just do it for like 2 minutes, and then they're literally done. And you just pour them onto the parchment paper or a really well-oiled baking sheet. We do use parchment paper a little bit in this book. We tried really hard only to use it if you absolutely have to, because usually you can use cooking spray on almost anything. But the trick with this one is then you have to get it off the sheet tray, and they do stick quite a bit. So parchment paper really makes a difference. But we do say that you can reuse the parchment paper for a lot of different things. So for example, if I use this for nuts, the parchment paper, and then I was gonna roast some sort of vegetable tomorrow, I could use the same parchment paper because it's even just gonna add a little bit of flavor and salt and pepper and a little bit of extra sweetness. So we should do that. And one more trick for the parchment paper, if you have parchment paper that is in a sheet along a roll of a big roll, and you're putting it on there and it's always rolling up on you, take that parchment sheet, and this one, I actually like the sheets like this because I think I use a little bit less of it because I only use as much as I need to, and there's no trying to pull it off. But if yours is the roll up kind, just take the parchment paper and crunch it together like this and then smooth it out.
Is there a
there.
limit to how many times you can kind of reuse it? I mean, like,
As many as you feel comfortable.
okay.
I mean, you really can. You'd be surprised at how sturdy it stays up. I have used it so many times sometimes that it makes my food a little bit of extra blackness because it's so dark. So that's really the only problem, is you just have to make sure that it's not gonna get your food extra burnt, because as you notice, I have nice shiny pans, because I finally realized that my darkened pans that I'd had, for 20 years were changing the recipe times on my food, because my stuff was getting done really quickly, because when you have and I was used to that, so I was used to watching it. But then, like, for example, for this book, Elise, our photographer, was saying, Serena, it's just taking me so much longer to get the food done than it does for you. And then I realized it was the pans that I use. And I still keep them, because sometimes I want things to get done really quickly, and so I use darkened sheet pans, especially like for the cauliflower. I needed to do it really quickly the other day, and so I used the dark pans, and I just watched it, and it literally cuts the baking time sometimes at least 10 minutes, a lot of times 15 minutes off. So that's a good tip. But if you want to have more recipes that are more seamless and not as
Consistent.
variable. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm moving away from this. I'm sorry, people online. I hope you can still hear me. Then you want to get your nicer sheet pans too, or at least get new sheet pans, every couple. But save those old ones, because again, you'll probably use it. All right. So these are going to be cooling. I'm just going to. I forgot to ask you guys. Did the bookmarks come in?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have those too. So, can you grab me one of them, and we'll just kind of talk through a few of those. What we did is we put together a bookmark. Oh, I knew there was one more thing. I put it out here so I wouldn't forget. So we brought the season. So you guys will all get a bookmark, and it has our seasonal recipes not to miss. So the cookbook authors always say, this is my favorite quote from your Joe Schmo cookbook author, which is your favorite recipe in the whole book? And then they say, oh, I couldn't pick a favorite recipe, because it's like picking a favorite child, which, since my daughter is here, I would say it's her. But I wouldn't say that. I mean, I have lots of favorite recipes in here, and these are our favorite ones in each season. So for fall and winter are the ones that we put on here right now. The Good Morning Polenta Ricotta with apples, toasted squash, seeds, and cheese board. And that one is because it's a really, really pretty picture, but it's also, like I said, one of my favorite ways to use stuff up. And because so many people are surprised that you can roast squash seeds. So it's just like roasting pumpkin seeds, except for squash seeds are, I think, even better, because they're smaller and they have an outside shell that's much softer, or not as thick as pumpkin seeds. So they're a lot easier to crunch. So whenever you're cooking a butternut squash or an acorn squash or any of those, don't toss the seeds. Just throw them straight into the oven on a sheet pan like this with cooking spray, and toss them in a bunch of oil. We tell you how to do it, and roast them in there. And then don't clean the pumpkin guts or the pumpkin squash guts off of them, because, and I think that's my husband's term of what that stuff is, but it's like the stringy pulp stuff. Because when you roast them in the oven, with squash seeds, there's not very much of it, and it just kind of turns toasty and crunchy. But with pumpkin seeds, sometimes you have a lot of that stuff, and it turns into like fruit leather. It's so good. It's just like chewy and salty, and it's so good. It's like free food. That's what we like to say in this book, is when anytime you can use up stuff that you normally would toss away, it's like free food, which is this one. I wanted to show these to you guys. They got a little crunched in the car. But these, of course, are scallions that I regrew. And maybe you've seen this trick before, that when you use scallions, use it up to about an inch left, and then save this save this part and just put it in a shot glass with just a tiny bit of water. You don't want much because otherwise it will get a little moldy. But if you use just a tiny bit of water, just like this much, and then when it gets dry, just add a little bit more. And I've been growing these guys for about a week and a half, so it doesn't take long.
In the refrigerator?
No, just out on the counter. Out on the counter. And in a windowsill if you want, but these I wanted to start them early so I'd have them for like my TV spot and today. So I went away over the holidays and I started growing them at my mother-in-law's house. And then I'm like, oh, I can't forget those. So I threw them in my suitcase and they sat in my suitcase for like 2 days in a little, I think it was in some parchment paper wrapped up really tight. And they were still fine. So they did not die. And so I think it would actually work without very much sunlight. You just a little bit of light. But these I started on Saturday. So they've already grown. Actually, not this one.
So you're always keeping, the water will get absorbed, but you're always adding a little more water?
Yeah.
And then you just keep cutting off what you
Yes.
need and then regrowing? Or-
Yes. I've done it like 3 times. After about 3 times,
Okay.
it's kind of, I don't know. It looks a little, well, and also then if I remember right, although these look really good, and I've done this one twice, but they do start to look, they start to smell a little funny.
Okay.
So, but you do it at least 2 or 3 times for sure. So, but and like I tell my kids, look guys, free food. Like this is stuff that you just didn't have before and you got it now. So, all right. So I'll let you guys read these, but this is one of my favorite recipes because another one, it's kind of a showstopper. If you can remember it next year for Thanksgiving, or if you have vegetarian friends coming for Thanksgiving, this is an awesome recipe for Thanksgiving for the main dish. It is this whole pumpkin cheesy gratin. So basically you're just cooking a whole pumpkin, and this is a trick that we tell you to do, is to, anytime you're cooking a butternut squash or a pumpkin or an acorn squash, you know how you got your giant knife and your roly pumpkin or squash, and you're like, okay, is this going to end well? Because, a sharp knife and roly thing that you're supposed to cut through, and it's really hard. Well, one trick is you just, before you cut it, you take like a smaller paring knife or something and just hold onto it well and hit a couple pokes in it and then stick it in the microwave. The whole thing, just stick it in the microwave. That will soften the flesh so that then you can slice into it and then you can either roast it or you can just continue cooking it in the microwave because of course microwave cooking is much more energy efficient than in the oven. But if you do want that roasty golden cooking beautifulness when you're done, then cook it in the microwave, in the oven. But in order to avoid, this ending badly, then do it in the microwave first. All right, and then our roasted cabbage wedge Caesar salad. That is one of our favorites because most people don't think of cabbage as something that you're gonna like, but this recipe is so yummy and it's a typical Caesar salad. We do have ideas to not use anchovies, but we would definitely recommend it. And then our tahini roasted carrots and parsnips, because it's a great way to try tahini if you've never tried it before. And it's that roasted sesame flavor. The cheesy broccoli greens with za'atar. Another spice you may not have tried before is za'atar, which is kind of a flavor that's like thyme. How many of you have tried it? Maybe I want to explain it if almost everyone's tried it. It's kind of like thyme, but it's got sesame and salt in it, and then a spice called sumac, which gives it a lemony flavor, which makes it kind of more refreshing, I guess you'd say. Then the pear gorgonzola roasted kale pita pizzas, because it's a great super quick meal, but a fun way to try kale because not everybody loves kale. And then the oregano, fennel, garlic, slow cooker pulled pork, because it was kind of surprising what just cooking this very inexpensive piece of meat in a slow way in the slow cooker with a bunch of different herbs on it can make it, there's no picture, I forgot. That makes it, and then a great, cut of meat to have a lot and then use throughout the week in beans, in salads, in tacos, and however you want to use it. So it's very economical because you can use it in a lot of different ways. All right, any questions before? Yes.
So earlier you were talking about, I think, the picture from Philadelphia, was it sardines?
Yes.
So sardines is something that then once you open that can, you use one, then what do you
Great
do? Can you
question.
freeze those or?
Yes. So take them out of the can and put them in a mason jar and keep them in the fridge and add them to almost any time you're cooking onions. You can add one sardine or one anchovy because it really will, especially anchovies. Sardines are a little bit bigger and a little bit meatier, but you could still add them to anytime you were using, like if you have one sardine, you really can't make a sandwich out of it. But if you opened a can of tuna, you could mix it in with the tuna. But if you have a whole jar of anchovies, honestly, anytime you're sauteing onions, just add one anchovy. It will up the umami flavor, it will up the just deliciousness of it. And honestly, no one can taste it. I mean, I have a kid, I'm a dietitian and I have a kid who doesn't eat fish. And she cannot tell if I add one anchovy to like a soup or a stew.
This one?
Or not that one. It's another one. And she's old now. How old is she? 15? She's 15 and she still doesn't like fish. I failed as a dietitian. No, she doesn't like fish. Okay, she doesn't like it. And I'm not going to change it. But she can't tell if I can add it. And if she can't tell, then probably nobody can.
Is buying anchovies like when you buy a can of tuna, there's the white tuna in water, there's in oil, there's like chunk tuna, like is anchovies the same thing, there's all the different choices?
It's usually always in oil, but it does come with different flavors. So if you wanted, like if you're a super spice lover and you wanted to, that's not true. Sardines are that way. Anchovies are usually always in just oil.
Okay.
They're usually not
Doesn't matter
flavored.
what kind you're cooking.
No, and there's high end and there's low end. And if you pay for more, then you might taste a difference. But if you've never tried anchovies before, start with the least expensive one because you're probably just going to use it in something. You're not going to have it on a pizza or on. So I would say just start with but that we do have a couple different ways to use up the oil in the book. So you can try that out too. That was one thing that I sort of had to get over. Deanna's like, oh yes, you can use it. But I had to be like, I'm not so sure. But I tried it in a couple different ways. Usually it's in like a big pot of something. Or if it is a tuna sandwich, you could add a little bit of that oil in there. So the only thing I guess I would say that is unique in anchovies, sometimes they're preserved in like safflower oil or cottonseed oil. And I would pick olive oil just because of the health benefits that you're going to have with olive oil. But sardines are usually in different flavors. And so you can choose different flavors and start with that. Do we have any questions online? I don't know if you had any
Doesn't look like it.
comments. Or we didn't really encourage them, but just in case. Anything else? I guess I'll just give one plug for the rest of my books, but I know Left Bank Books has the 30-minute Mediterranean diet in right now, and the Easy Every Day you guys can order, and this one also is in right now too. So if they also have a few stickers, so if you need autograph stickers, I think you guys can send them out to people who would be watching online too. Okay, and then if you want any more if you have any questions or if you want to get in contact with me, I'm at Teaspoon of Curry on Instagram. So that's TSP Curry for because I have red hair, and we are teaspoonofspice.com. And that's where all of our recipes are, or Teaspoon of Spice Facebook page. We do cooking demos every Thursday at 11:30. If you'd like to join. Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, go ahead.
Would you say, like, if you've never done Mediterranean, would you
Okay.
start with one of your cookbooks or?
Well, probably because I really love this book. I think that this is the Sustainable Mediterranean Diet Cookbook because it gives you just a little dabbling of so many different things. It's more diverse in the recipes that it has. They're still really simple. It has beautiful pictures. I love this book, and this one is sold really, really well. I mean, it's absolutely a bestseller, but there's not very many pictures. So this one I love because it has so many pictures, and it's got all the healthy kitchen hacks, and it's got just if you like reading head notes, there's some fun head notes. But it really is from across the Mediterranean.
Okay.
So if you want to cook everything from all 21 countries, I mean, we don't have one from every country, but we started with inspiration from all over the Mediterranean Sea, North Africa, Middle East, Turkey, Croatia, and then of course Greece, Italy, Crete, all over.
What TV show were you being filmed for?
So it was a TV show out of Portland, Oregon, and it was a morning show, and of course it was, back to New Year's resolutions. Kit hit two birds with one stone, your sustainability and earth-friendly resolutions plus your health resolutions all in one shot. So thanks for asking. The spot is on our Facebook page if you want to watch it. And you can hear the lady ask, "What do I do if I don't like cauliflower?" and see my response and see if I did an okay job. No, she was very lovely about it. She just, it's a good question.
Yeah, but I feel like you can really do a lot of weird, like cauliflower is like a tabula rasa, you can just do anything with it.
It's very much an open blank palette. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. This is really fun. I enjoyed it. Those of you who are watching can come help yourself too.